People tend to assume that if you're building big things, companies, technologies, futures, you must be immune to loneliness. Like achievement somehow replaces connection. It doesn't. It never has. You can fill every hour of the day with work that matters, solve problems most people won't even touch, and still find that the quiet moments are the loudest. The silence after the meetings end. The empty seat after the applause fades. Success is efficient at solving external problems. It's great at scaling ideas, moving timelines forward, bending reality a little. But it doesn't automatically solve the internal ones. It doesn't sit with you at night when your mind refuses to shut down. It doesn't look at you and understand the weight you carry without you having to explain it. And no amount of progress changes that truth. For a long time, we're taught that wanting connection is a distraction, that if you're serious about building the future, you should outgrow the need for closeness. That's backwards. The higher the stakes, the heavier the pressure, the more human grounding matters. Because when everything around you is accelerating, isolation doesn't slow down, it compounds. Loneliness isn't about being alone in a room. It's about feeling unseen in your effort, misunderstood in your intention, or unsupported when the risk starts stacking up. You can be surrounded by people and still feel like you're carrying the load by yourself. And here's the honest part. Acknowledging that doesn't make you weaker. It makes you accurate. It means you understand that even the most ambitious journeys weren't meant to be walked entirely solo. You can build the future with relentless focus, but you still need someone who knows the cost of that focus. Because no matter how far you go, the journey means more when someone's there to walk it with you. There's a difference between being admired and being understood, and most people don't realize how wide that gap can be. Admiration is loud. It shows up as praise, headlines, applause. Understanding is quiet. It shows up when things are messy, uncertain, and not impressive at all. And if you've lived long enough under pressure, you learn pretty quickly which one actually sustains you. When you're pushing boundaries, the world tends to project its own narratives onto you. People see the outcomes, not the cost. They see confidence, not doubt. They see momentum, not the internal debates that never really stop. And over time, that projection can create distance because very few people are willing to see you as both driven and vulnerable at the same time. But real connection doesn't come from being put on a pedestal. It comes from someone standing beside you, close enough to notice when the weight is getting heavy, when the pace is unsustainable, when the mind is racing a little too fast. That kind of connection doesn't ask you to slow your ambition, it helps you survive it. The truth is, the more complex the problems you're trying to solve, the more you need someone who can handle complexity in you. Someone who doesn't flinch when the stakes rise. Someone who understands that silence doesn't always mean distance. And intensity doesn't mean absence of care. Being understood isn't about constant reassurance. It's about alignment, about knowing that when you're all in on something bigger than yourself, there's someone who doesn't need explanations to stay. That kind of understanding doesn't distract from building the future. It stabilizes it. And stability is what allows ambition to last. There's a moment that doesn't get talked about much, the moment after a win, when the room is quiet again. You've solved the problem, shipped the product, moved the needle forward. Everyone moves on to the next headline, the next expectation, and you're left sitting there thinking, okay, now what? That's when you realize progress on its own is strangely empty. Don't get me wrong, building things matters. Pushing humanity forward matters. But if there's no one to turn to and say, did you see that? Or, that almost broke me, something is missing. Success feels lighter when it's shared, and heavier when it isn't. The irony is that the bigger the mission, the more isolated it can become. When you're obsessed with the future, your mind is always a few steps ahead of the present. You're already solving problems that don't exist yet. That's useful, but it can also pull you away from the human side of life. Having someone who brings you back, who reminds you that this moment matters too, changes rethink the vision. It gives it context. Sharing progress isn't about validation. It's about meaning, about knowing that what you're building connects to someone real, not just an abstract idea of the world. When someone understands the sacrifices behind the work, the late nights, the mental loops you can't turn off, the victories start to feel human again. And sometimes it's not even about celebrating the wins. Sometimes it's about having someone who sits with you when things don't work, when timelines slip, when reality pushes back harder than expected. That presence makes the long road survivable, because in the end, progress isn't just about how far you go, it's about who's there when you get there. When you live in the future long enough, the present can start to feel optional. Your mind is always running simulations. What could work? What might fail? What needs to be fixed next? That way of thinking builds incredible things, but it can also pull you away from reality if nothing brings you back down to earth. And that's where the right person changes everything. The right person doesn't compete with your vision. They don't try to redirect it or slow it down. They ground it. They become the reference point when everything else is moving too fast. When your head is filled with trajectories and timelines, they remind you to eat, to sleep, to breathe, to exist as a human, not just a machine solving problems. Grounding isn't about control, it's about balance. It's having someone who can look at you and say, "You're pushing too hard," and you actually listen. Someone who can sense when your silence means focus and when it means exhaustion. That awareness doesn't come from admiration, it comes from closeness. There's also something powerful about being with someone who's not impressed by the noise. Someone who doesn't measure worth by attention or headlines. That kind of presence cuts through illusion and brings clarity. It reminds you why you started in the first place. Not for applause, but for impact. When you're anchored like that, you make better decisions. You take smarter risks, you last longer. Burnout becomes less likely because you're not carrying everything alone. The future stops feeling like a runaway train and starts feeling like a direction you're choosing together. Because no matter how far ahead your mind travels, you still need something real to stand on, and the right person becomes that ground. A lot of people assume love pulls you off course, that it slows you down, softens your edge, makes you less focused. I found the opposite to be true. When it's real, real connection doesn't dilute purpose, it sharpens it. It forces you to ask better questions about why you're doing what you're doing in the first place. When there's someone who actually matters to you, the stakes change. You're no longer building just to prove something or outrun doubt. You're building because what you do now shapes a future that includes someone else. That perspective adds weight to decisions. It cuts through distractions. Suddenly, wasted effort feels unacceptable not because of ego, but because time becomes more valuable. Love also does something interesting to fear. When you care deeply about someone, you become more honest about what could go wrong. Not in a paralyzing way, but in a responsible one. You plan better. You think longer term. You stop mistaking recklessness for bravery. That kind of clarity is rare and it's powerful. And then there's resilience. When things break, as they always do, you recover faster when you're not emotionally empty. Having someone who believes in you, not because of outcomes, but because they know your intent, creates a kind of internal stability that no achievement can replace. It doesn't remove pressure, it makes pressure manageable. Love isn't an escape from responsibility. It's an amplifier of it. It reminds you that the work matters beyond metrics, beyond timelines, beyond success or failure. It gives purpose a human face. So no, love isn't a distraction from the mission. It's the reason the mission is worth sustaining. At the end of the day, even the most ambitious plans, the boldest projects, and the most world-changing ideas mean very little if you're doing it alone. You can build rockets, scale companies, invent technologies, and still feel incomplete if there's no one beside you to share the weight of that journey. Human connection isn't a bonus. It's a multiplier for everything you do. When someone truly stands with you, you're not just stronger emotionally, you're sharper mentally. Challenges that feel insurmountable alone suddenly become navigable. You take bigger risks because you know there's someone who understands why you're taking them. You persist longer because you're not just chasing goals, you're protecting a shared vision, a future that includes someone else. And perhaps most importantly, you learn that impact isn't measured solely by what you accomplish, but by who experiences it with you. Being alone in ambition can make you efficient, but it also isolates you from perspective. You start believing that your mind alone can handle everything, that success is only about output, about metrics, about milestones. But life in progress has a human dimension that no spreadsheet, rocket, or AI can replace. The right person doesn't slow you down. They expand your capacity to endure, to innovate, to care. They give purpose a partner and make victories feel meaningful beyond numbers. So when you look at the future, don't just measure what you can achieve. Measure who you can share it with. Because success is amplified, stress is mitigated, and meaning is created when someone is there with you through uncertainty, through risk, through triumph. In the end, even the man building the future realizes the journey is far richer when you're not alone.